we can address them. So basically, the way yung threshold VAR works is that well, yung gusto natin mangyari is, we want to be able to model yung impact ng VAR models kasi in general provide us with a model where nag-iiba-iba independent variables. So for example, in one model meron kang si Malaysia yung independent variable, and then it's receiving an impact from Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, world oil, crude price, and economic activity. And then another one si Indonesia naman, and so on. So kumbaga lahat sila may examine natin kung ano yung impact sa kanila ng world oil, crude price, and economic activity. No, so that's essentially the idea of a VAR model. But in a threshold VAR, meron tayong additional element, no, which is yung switching between a bear market and a bull market. But the idea kasi is that in theory, we don't know when we're in a bull market or a bear market. No, at least hindi natin masasabi with some strict confidence or certainty na nasa bull market tayo or nasa bear market tayo. It's sort of like a hidden variable. And ganoon siya tinitreat ni threshold VAR. So, in this case, yung idea natin no is that yun yung gusto natin i-measure na model. So sa table 1, distributive statistics doesn't really answer anything in your research questions. No, it doesn't really address an objective. It's more of just an early look into the data. So because the readers will not really be seeing the data, no, when people read your manuscript or thesis, they won't really have access to the complete data set in general. Now, so this one is to give them an idea of at least what the data looks like. No? So meron silang perspective na ito yung itsura ng data, ganito yung features ng data, and pwedeng ma-contextualize yung results. So kita lang natin ito ano yung average price for the Malaysian index, average price for Indonesia, average price for Philippines, Thailand, and so on. And then naman yung average price ng world oil production, crude price, economic activity index. Now, we also see some statistics there like the median, the SD. So yung statistics na mean, median, minimum, maximum, they're very self-explanatory. Now, siguro if anything yung bago dito would be si skewness at si kurtosis. So we'll give a brief note about that. Skewness is a measure of symmetry. Na gaano ka-symmetric or not yung data. When we say that something is negatively skewed, that means yung majority nung data natin no is baliktad kasi siya. So si negative skewness or skewed to the right means that most of the data would be found in the right side. So pag sinabi nating negative skew, majority ng data nasa right, tapos nasa malalaki yung numbers, tapos meron ka lang ilan na maliliit yung values. On the other hand, a positive skew naman would be a form wherein majority ng data nasa maliit na mababa, and then yung tail mo nasa right side, meaning merong majority ng values are small, meron ka lang ilan na excessively high compared sa others. And then, kung hindi sila skewed, they're symmetric, then mukha siyang normal distribution wherein naka-center yung data. No, ibig sabihin, balance yung dami ng high values at yung dami ng low values. So in your skewness statistic, kapag lumabas na it's a negative number, then that means may negative skew. And then kapag positive number, it's a positive skew. Pero kapag malapit sa zero, we generally just say that it's symmetric. So yun yung makikita natin dito. For the Philippines, it's mostly symmetric. For Malaysia, may slight positive skew kasi 0.158 is a positive number, but still, maliit kasi siya, no? Malapit pa siya sa zero. So we still say that it's still mostly symmetric. Ganyan din kay Indonesia, merong slight negative tendency, pero dahil malapit pa rin siya sa zero, symmetric pa rin siya for the most part. Yung nakita natin dito na talagang merong skew is yung world oil production. So world oil production means that there's a couple of months no na maliit yung production, but in general nasa upper end tayo ng production. No? Generally, production is higher than the mean. So meron lang tayo ilang mga months wherein we observe a lower than average production of oil. No, so yun, ganun siya. On the other hand, si skewness naman is gaano ka-concentrated yung values around the center or gaano siya ka-peak. No, so in this case, kapag negative, that means flat. Walang concentration, spread out yung values. Kapag positive naman na malaking number, then it would be it would be, kapag positive, it would be a high level of concentration. Na hindi kapag malapit sa zero, mukha lang siya normal, so moderate yung level of concentration niya. So si negative 0.986, negative 0.925, na they're technically negative, flat, pero again, we generally assume na regular lang yung kurtosis nila. Yung nakikita natin na may mataas na kurtosis is again si world oil production with 1.449. So this is a high number, meaning majority of the data can be found around the center, na kung saan mataas yung concentration niya. So most of them would be above the center, and then kung nasan yung concentration na yon, mataas yung level of concentration doon. Ibig sabihin, rarely kang mag-spread out in terms of values. So hindi spread out yung world oil production. That means on a month-to-month basis, hindi masyadong nagbabago yung world oil production. So that's what it means, yung skewness and yung kurtosis. Yung next dito sa stages natin sa analysis is to perform a unit root test. And the unit root test is just to check for stationarity in the time series. No, kailangan stationary yung time series natin para magamit natin siya sa T-VAR model. Kasi if they're not stationary, then posible tayo makakuha ng tinatawag na spurious correlations, meaning it will look like may correlation yung variables, it will look like may impact, for example, si world oil kay Philippine index, pero wala talaga. It just so happens na pareho kasi silang may trend. No, so, pagdating sa testing for stationarity, kailangan mai-confirm muna natin na stationary sila before we can proceed with the analysis. So that lahat sila stationary. So we do this in two ways. No? Yung first one is base series, meaning wala muna tayong babaguhin, basta kung ano yung variables na nakuha natin, yun yung gagamitin natin for analysis. And then we can say that it passes the unit root test, no? Meaning stationary siya, wala siyang trend, if the value that you're seeing here, naka-highlight si p-value, is less than 0.05. So if this is less than 0.05, then stationary siya. And that's only true for economic activity. So wala tayong problem kay economic activity index. It's stationary, meaning hindi siya increasing on the long run, hindi rin siya decreasing on the long run. It's mostly just stationary, no, around the fixed range. Next, everything else doesn't pass the unit root test kasi lahat matataas yung p-value. So that means we need to do some kind of transformation here. So rather than look at the base series, we'll look at what's called the first difference. And the first difference is essentially the rate of change. Na so ano yung rate of change or price increase? Pagdating dito sa markets, na ano yung price increase? Pagdating naman dito sa world oil crude price and economic activity, basically ano lang yung change, percentage change. And then kapag ginawa natin yung percentage change or yung first difference, you'll notice that they now all pass the stationarity test or the unit root test. So lahat sila stationary na. So ito yung gagamitin na ngayon natin na data, yung stationary na data. So for Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, world oil and crude prices, we will be using their first differences. Pero kay economic activity, ang gagamitin natin si base series kasi hindi niya naman niya kinailangan i-transform. Since right off the bat, nakita natin na stationary siya. And then everything else is, ito yung plot na to is just to demonstrate no, kung ano yung itsura ng mga data. So, ano yung itsura ng world oil, crude price, economic index. No, but really where the next results come in is sa threshold VAR model. And the threshold VAR model is essentially just yung represents yung impact no ng mga markets on bursa, world oil. So the way you read this is yung column, no, nakagroup sila by column. Etong column na to, ano yung impact on the Malaysia index. So yan yung mga bababa niyo siya babasahin. And then ito naman na to, ano yung impact on the world oil, no, and ano yung impact on the crude price. Kasi nga sabi ko si VAR model, nag-iiba-iba yung dependent variable mo. So kung i-consider mo si Malaysian stock market as the dependent variable, ito yung equation na nagko-correspond doon. Pero kung si world oil prices naman, yung i-consider mo na variable, ito yung titignan mo. Kung si crude price, ito. Kung si econ, ito. Pero ang concern lang naman natin is itong nasa left side. Kasi ang gusto nating malaman is ano yung impact ng world oil prices, no, aggregate shocks, economic shocks, and so on sa Malaysian market. And then later sa Philippines, Thailand, and so on. It's on a per country basis. And because it's threshold bar, we're looking at two models. The first model is what we call the low regime or the bear market regime. And then the other one is the high regime or the bull market regime. And dito natin mako-compare no, kung kailan significant yung prices mo. So for example, in a bear market, you'll notice kapag may asterisk, no, yung value na to is yung impact. Ito yung actual impact on Malaysian index. Ito naman yung standard error. So this is just telling us about the level of certainty in the estimates. Pero yung babantayan nyo dito is pag naglagay ako ng asterisk. If I put in an asterisk there, that means based on the results no of based on significance testing, this effect is significant pag may asterisk. Okay? So yun yung babantayan nyo dito. And then ano ibig sabihin ng -1? These are what we call your lags. Kasi in a VAR model, ang impact is coming from previous time periods. So Bursa -1 means yung impact ng Malaysian index from 1 month before. And then si Bursa -2 is yung impact from 2 months before. So for example, kapag nagka-shock sa crude price 2 months before, may impact daw yun kay Malaysian index na 0.0009 or 0.09%. Okay? But again, keep in mind na we're talking about, we also have to consider kung significant ba sila. So in this case, sa low regime no, or sa bear market, hindi sila significant at all. So that means in general, walang effect yung mga oil shocks, aggregate shocks, and so on the Malaysian index in the middle of a bear market. However, in the middle of a bull market, then may impact si world oil prices of about minus 0.0005. That means in the middle of a bull market, if nagkaroon ng shock in the world oil production, no, that would result in a decrease in the value of the Malaysian index of about 0.0005. And so far, yun lang nakita natin na may impact no, pagdating kay Malaysia. It's just the world oil production. Significant si Bursa -2 saka si Bursa -1. That means pag mataas yung value ni Malaysia last month, then this month mas mababa siya by -3.1954. On the other hand, kapag mataas naman, nagkaroon ng shock na meaning mataas yung value ni Malaysia 2 months ago, then you're looking at an impact of an increase this month of 1.9651. But this is just what you would call a law of averages pagdating sa stock market prices. No, wherein pag masyado ka mataas last month, probably babagsak ka this month. Kung masyado ka mababa last month, probably tataas ka this month. Kaya lang may ganung effect. Yung binabantayan talaga natin dito is kung may effect ba si world oil crude price or econ either last month, no, from 1 month ago or from 2 months ago. And it turns out, as far as we can see here, may impact lang siya 2 months ago. And it's a negative impact. Now, ito yung impulse response functions natin. So, impulse response functions is essentially telling us, kapag ba nagkaroon ng shock from world oil, crude price, or econ, may makikita ba tayo impact on each of these variables? No? So, in this case, si Bursa, mapansin nyo, wala siyang movement. No? And this is interesting kasi ibig sabihin, even though may nakita tayong significant na effect ni world oil production, it seems like no, in terms of the volatility in the Malaysian index, hindi siya significant, not significant, pero it's not enough to be counted as a shock pagdating sa impulse response functions. Because we're talking about this in terms of standard deviations. Na ilang standard deviations na movement kay Malaysia. And kita nyo kanina, even though it's significant, it's very small. It's only 0.0005. So if you count that, considering yung already inherent variability sa Malaysian index, it doesn't look like anything pag tinignan mo siya sa impulse response function. So, yun yung consideration natin. Now, the way you read this result is basically repeating for the next countries. So for the Indonesian market, may impact Si Indo 1 and Indo -2 in the bear market, walang impact yung 3 variables natin. And then, ganun din sa, essentially ganun din sa bull market. No? So for the Indonesian index, it seems like generally wala lang talagang association na yung tatlong prices. However, if we look at the shocks sa impulse response functions, there seems to be some movement, especially pag nagkaroon ka ng shock kay crude price. No, but it's difficult for us to conclude it as being anything kasi walang nakitang significant effects in the TVAR model. So there's some movement here, but that could be due to other factors, or it could just be coincidental kasi hindi significant siya dun sa TVAR. So meaningful na impulse response functions kung significant siya in the TVAR model. So it's actually quite prevalent in your results na hindi sila nagsisignificant. And yun yung mapansin nyo dito. For example, pag kay Philippines at kay Thailand, wala na tayong nakitang significant effect. No, so it does get to be quite prevalent pagdating sa model. Now, if I were to recommend this a way forward, no, kasi I mean, I'm not saying these results are bad, pero of course, medyo hindi siya ganun ka-helpful, no, kung wala tayong nakitang significant na effect. If I am to recommend any way forward, what I'm thinking here is we could probably let go of the limitations. Kasi so far, di ba, nag-sampling kayo. When we talk about the Philippine market, we're not really talking about the PSEI as a whole. We're talking about a number of select companies in the Philippines, and then aggregated lang sila dito. So rather than doing that, rather than choosing independent companies, we could just instead, or choosing individual companies, we could just instead use data from the PSEI directly. So talagang titignan natin is yung buong PSEI index. That may be a better way forward here kasi it's possible that the countries we chose talagang walang impact, no? Kasi again, this isn't representative of the Philippine market or the Malaysian market. It's just representative of companies that were entered into the data. No? So it's possible that if we look at the PSEI directly, na baka in other companies kasi, particularly the bigger companies, baka sa kanila may impact itong variables nito. No, na hindi lang ma-capture when we limited the study to a handful of companies. But otherwise, yun yung results natin. Questions?
None so far naman po.
None also, see, for me.
All right. So, yeah, if any questions arise, no, just let me know sa group chat natin, and then depending on the difficulty of the question, it might require more of a discussion. We can schedule another meeting.
Sir?
Yeah.
Question lang po.
Yeah.
So, for the shocks that are created by the oil, so parang in general na siya, so parang included na dun yung mga oil supply shocks, aggregate demand shocks, and oil-specific demand shocks.
Well, in this case, they're represented by the 3 different prices kasi, no? So, when you say oil price shocks, that is the shock from crude price. And then, when you say aggregate demand shock, that's coming from the economic activity. And then all specific demand shock pala si crude price. Si oil production, si oil supply shock. Ito si oil supply shock. They're just represented by their corresponding variables.
Oh, okay. So, parang yung global real economic activity represents the oil-specific demand shocks, and then the crude price represents supply. And
World oil production is oil supply shock. So ito si oil supply shock. Crude price is oil-specific demand shock. And then si economic production, economic activity is the aggregate demand shock.
Okay, sir. Noted po. Sir, another question, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, for based on your recommendation po, since we're doing sa our manuscript already, so you would recommend po. So, since yung countries po namin is Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, so like what you said earlier po na instead, di ba, what we did po kasi is we just chose 10 companies from each country. So, parang ang gagawin na lang po namin is parang just
The whole
ang-
index.
the whole index po.
Yeah. So for Philippines, rather than choosing 10 companies, ang download nyo the data instead is si PSEI.
So we need to download the data po ulit, sir.
Pero PSEI, sin yung PSEI index. When we say PSEI index, that's yung one overall aggregated index na nire-release ni PSE. That's what we'll be using instead. So right now kasi ang gamit natin is data only for the 10 companies. But if we use the PSEI index, it's possible na we may be able to capture yung impact niya on other companies as well. Na hindi na naiwan kasi dun sa 10 companies. Kasi baka it just so happens na itong particular 10 companies na to in terms of impact ng demand shock sa kanila, wala lang, hindi sila masyado naapektuhan. Maybe because they had other things going on.
Okay, sir. That's all for me po.
All right. Sorry, Miguel, you were saying something?
No po, sir. I have no questions po.
All right. So yun, unfortunately, I will have to go kasi I am going to be teaching a class later. Pero if you have any questions, then just let me know in our group chat and then we can schedule further meetings as the need arises.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
Noted po,
All
sir.
right, thanks everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you very much.